to have a little look at Ukraine's chart. There are two charts here because, as you guys know, Ukraine really became a nation back in 1922. In fact, the chart I've actually got here is for the 26th of January 1918, when it was declared an independent country, and that's kind of the first time it really became an independent entity. But there's also another chart for when it left the Soviet Union. So it was incorporated in the Soviet Union in 1922 because it's the 100th anniversary of the actual Soviet Union this year. But actually, there was a declaration of independence, as I say, in 1918. And then again, it's when it left the Soviet Union and became in its modern sort of state of Ukraine. But in terms of Ukraine as a country, it only really became a country then because its history is totally intertwined with Russia. Ukrainians and Russians are generally the same kind of ethnic genetic mix. Their language is very similar. They share a history. In fact, Ukraine is almost the womb of Russia because the first capital of Russia was Kiev. And then it later moved to Moscow, but the whole sort of Russian Empire grew out of Ukraine. So, as I say, they have such a common history. And in terms of being part of the Soviet Union, they shared many of the problems, the oppression represented by the Soviet Union as well. So I'll talk a little bit about that, and then I'm going to do some other discussions. I just want to say, in case you're watching my channel for the first time, that my stance is that I am against all wars totally. I don't agree with any violence. I always feel that the civilians and innocent people are the only victims. The elites, the people who fund the war, the people who profit from the war, never experience the hardship. I believe most wars are driven by financial interests and not actually national interests. I think national differences are stoked in order to create these wars so that, the elites can move around the pawns on the global chessboard for their own advantage. It's all about resources. It's all about managing big masses of people. It's a lot about divide and conquer. So I don't favor conflict at all. I think people should in general refuse to fight. So I certainly am not ever going to support any government and say, oh, wow, they're fighting for their people. No, that's really, really never the case. And most of the time, the pretext for war is totally spurious. For example, why did World War I start? Because some guy got shot in Serbia. I forgot his name, actually. Franz Ferdinand, that's it, So I just was going to say, back in just before the Iraq thing with George Bush in 1993, I was early on in my sort of career as an astrologer. And Russell Grant, who at that stage was a famous UK astrologer, was on the James Whale show. And he said the Iraq war was going to work out just brilliantly. It was going to be done and dusted. And it was going to be a wonderful new dawn for Iraq and all this. That's what he was predicting on the radio. So at the time, I wasn't invited on, but I rang up and I said, well, I'm an astrologer, and I totally disagree. This is going to be a massive quagmire, and it'll never end once it's started. It's just going to be untold loss, a financial, physical, personal loss. It's a dreadful thing to go into. And James Whale was incredibly rude to me. I mean, he did allow me a long time to speak, which I was amazed, because I went on, you know how I go on. But I mean, so I did have a lot to say. He let me speak, and then he said, oh, well, I don't like your prediction. I prefer Russell Grant's, and that was it. But anyhow, just thought I'd mention that. So, just in general, I just see these things as moving, items around on the global chessboard and provocation, etc., etc. So let's just have a look at this. This is the chart. I don't know if I can move it over a little bit for you. It's sort of stuck there. You're missing half of it because the way the picture's lined up, unfortunately. So anyway, let me just see what you can see here. Okay, you're missing the Pisces ascendant, right? Okay, this is the chart for, just to tell you, 26th of Jan. 26th Jan 1918, right? I've set it for 9:30 in the morning in Kiev. I think it's highly appropriate that there's a Pisces ascendant. If you can't see it, the ascendant is 23 degrees of Pisces, which means that Neptune is pretty much on the ascendant right now, transiting Neptune, and Jupiter will be there soon. Why I think the Pisces ascendant fits, it's because, it's a borderland. Ukraine means borderland. So it's almost not defined as a country. It's this sort of borderland torn between different factions and places. And possibly it was mainly during the, around the 800 AD. It was part of Khazaria, the Khazarian Empire, which I did an interesting BitChute only video on. Now, there are loads of similarities between this particular chart and the more recent chart for 1991. Things I'd like you to take note of is that there are very many Aquarius planets. There is the Sun in the first decan of Aquarius, and then you've got Uranus and Venus in the third decan of Aquarius. And here in Leo, we have Saturn conjunct Neptune directly opposite the Sun, and they are in kind of the first decan just of Leo. Why this is significant is because we've had Saturn Uranus in the first decan, and Saturn's now moved away, but Uranus is still in the first decan, and it's triggering the Saturn-Neptune conjunction and the Sun right now. It was conjuncting the Sun. It's moving away, but it's triggering that Sun opposite Saturn-Neptune. Now, I find it significant that they have the Saturn-Neptune conjunction because most countries under communism have that. That is symbolic of communism. Okay, here we see Moon in Cancer, and you can see Moon is being opposed by Pluto because transiting Pluto is in Capricorn. So Pluto opposite the Moon, Moon representing the people. This represents the threat to the people, the upheaval for the people, the massive destruction on resources, right, of the people. Moon in Cancer also represents it being quite an agrarian economy. Now, Moon in the fifth, it's a country known for authors and writing, so that represents something quite cultural there. Moon in Cancer in the fifth, very much to do with authorship and writing and everything like that. And let's see, so it is very significant right now that Pisces is on the ascendant. It represents to me a dissolution of the identity and the borders. So I think whatever happens in Ukraine, it will be split up, and I think Russia will probably take more than just Donbass and Lugansk right area. The country will either be totally absorbed or balkanized, but I do see Neptune conjunct the ascendant as a dissolution of the country in its current form, a breaking up of the country. Because of the separation in these houses in Aquarius and Leo, the planets in Aquarius and Leo are either in the first decan and the third decan, but not in the second decan. I think there'll be a lull in activity as Saturn moves back into the second decan. It's just gone like towards the third, and Uranus moves away from the first decan into the second. That's why I think there's going to be a lull of activity until end of the year, November, where it'll hot up when both those planets will be heading towards the third decan again and triggering Uranus, Venus, and right now they've been triggering the Sun, Neptune, and Saturn, but they'll be triggering Uranus, Venus. So Mercury is quite an important planet. I've looked back and seen that it has been triggered at important parts. For example, it was being triggered around about 2014. So Pluto was conjunct Mercury in 2014 when we had the Orange Revolution and the Maidan Uprising, and the leader was overthrown in the putsch. So Pluto was conjunct there. And now you see we have Mercury has progressed, if you have a look in the solar arcs, to being right on the ascendant. So again, when we have a total sort of change in the direction of the country in terms of the government, we have Mercury either activated or active. Okay, I don't think I had anything much more to say about this chart. Let's compare it to the other chart for Ukraine, which is here. Now you see, again, we have Neptunian themes because we had Pisces rising in the 1918 chart, and in this chart we have Neptune rising on a Capricorn ascendant. So again, we have this theme of Saturn and Neptune together, right? We have their Neptune-Uranus conjunction. So Uranus is very close to the ascendant. As you saw in the previous chart, the country's got a lot of Aquarius planets, and here we see Uranus is another very important, in an important position, again emphasizing the Aquarian themes, and that Aquarius is Uranus is sometimes linked with the far right, and we know there's been a far right problem in the Second World War, and now with the right sector and the Azov Battalion, there has been kind of an extreme right-wing element in Ukraine, as influenced by by Uranus and the Aquarius planets. And again here, Neptune in Capricorn on the ascendant, similar themes about borderland, dissolution, kind of this fusing of identities, indistinct identity, and the link with communism. We see Pluto in Scorpio there on the midheaven, which is super interesting because it is a country that's known for corruption, intrigue, dictatorship, powerful leaders. I think it's interesting that Saturn is in the first house, because we know that it's a country that's had an awful lot of hardship, deprivation, authoritarianism, and control. That could also go with Pluto there in Scorpio. We see that the moon and Saturn in the first house with the Capricorn ascendant, again, is a nod to the agrarian nature. It's the breadbasket of really the Middle East and Europe, producing so much wheat and grains. It's a rich country in terms of what it has to offer agriculturally and in terms of resources. Again, the moon in the first house, the nature of the country being so many poets and writers. It's quite culturally rich, and in terms of architecture, very architecturally rich, which is shown by Capricorn rising. You can see a load of planets here, mainly in Leo. The sun's actually in Virgo, so it's a Virgo country, in the 7th house. That says to me it has powerful enemies and allies, but it also says to me that the whole the nature of the country is very much influenced by its neighbors and by outside interests. So you have here the moon, kind of the people of Ukraine, is opposed to all these planets here in the 7th house. So I think everyone's got a finger in the pie. It's a kind of crossroads of political interests and political intrigue and political corruption. It's, like I say, it's at the crossroads of political intrigue and corruption. It's the crossroads of the New World Order. It's a very important chess piece. And thus I feel the actual people and the potential of a country has been suppressed just because so many other people have got a finger in the pie, and because Ukraine don't know who their friends and allies are. In fact, maybe they don't have any friends and allies. None of us do. All these governments all do is cause control. So it fears its neighbor Russia in a way, but in a way it has so much in common with Russia. It doesn't know whether it wants to be part of the EU, whether it wants to be part of NATO. Even apparently Zelensky's been a little bit bipolar on this issue. I think this all shows you that Ukraine doesn't know which way to jump. It doesn't know who its real friends are, who its allies are, and it's just caught in the crosshairs of so many different interests, and it almost is suppressed and can't fulfill its full potential. Maybe one day it'll find a role, but So that's kind of how I see it. Now, the transits weren't that interesting in terms of this chart, although, as we know, Uranus will be triggering by square. Uranus in Aquarius will be triggering Pluto in Scorpio, and Saturn is also from Taurus sitting here on the IC, representing, Saturn opposite Pluto always brings times of great hardship, cutbacks, people having to get back to basics, people being cut off from joy, from the normal sort of privileges that we should all have, more normal privileges and freedoms of day-to-day life. Saturn is an important planet, of course, being the ruler in Capricorn, with Capricorn rising. Now, when it was born, Saturn was here in Aquarius, so it has had a Saturn return quite recently, with the Saturn going full circle, and that's probably why things that weren't properly settled or worked out to do with the independence in 1991, chickens are coming home to roost from that. So certain problems were seeded then. There was almost a fly in the ointment in 1991. It wasn't set up ready to go. It was set up almost to fail. I think this country was set up to fail, and the failure is what we are now seeing. And as I say, with the Neptune themes, the borderland, the dissolution, I still see that operating quite strongly. The fact that North Node is on the ascendant says to me that this country is a victim of circumstance. It isn't in control of its own destiny. Its destiny is linked to things way beyond Ukraine. So I see Ukraine as a chess piece and a pawn right now. And I do, as you know, my feelings are that Vladimir Putin has been provoked into this action, and he felt it was the only thing he could do with NATO trying to put nukes and weapons and mercenaries, etc., in there. And as we know, with the bioweapons thing that's been discovered, I think his hand was forced, because I think they could have used Ukraine to stage a false flag to bring down Russia. And I think they would have done. We've seen so much with them trying with with the Skripal affair and Litvinenko to demonize Putin over these years. They've been looking for anything to bring down Russia. It's the final piece that they really need to nail. They need control of Russia to finalize the New World Order. And Putin, he may play along a little bit, but he's not playing along enough. Right, so he, however good or bad he is, he's definitely not playing along as much as they want him to. They were going to launch some sort of false flag or something from Ukraine eventually to bring down Russia, and they've provoked a reaction out of Putin, and I'm sure the spin-off for all of us are going to be pretty terrible. Okay, let's get a little bit gossipy now. When I was looking for the chart of Ukraine, I came across Jessica Adams's reading for Ukraine. Now, I never look at other astrologers. I'm just not that sort of person. I always do my own thing, and I'm not really worried what other people are doing. I don't compare myself. I've always just done my own thing, right or wrong. But I did just come across that, so I thought it was interesting. So she's got the chart for Ukraine, and let's see. So she says here, Ukraine is a Virgo, and her working people, Ukraine's working class, dominate. No wonder she's winning the war. Is she winning the war? This sounds like kind of a mainstream media narrative. I don't know. I mean, Russia has vast superiority in terms of their military. I don't think anything that's going in there can be winning, and I don't think it's the working class people that are winning the war. It's the mercenaries that are being sent in, the Azov battalion, the right sector, and these kind of paramilitary right-wing groups that are mainly driving the pushback of what there is. We know how much fake news there's been in terms of the ghost of Kiev and all the fake pictures. We can't be sure of what's really going on. So as far as winning the war, I think that's is that accurate? I don't think so. They don't have an air force, they don't have a navy, all their air stuff has been taken out, so I'm not sure about that. And what was I going to say? Oh, I did hear George Galloway, who is good on the subject, was reporting that ISIS fighters from Idlib are being diverted to Ukraine to fight, and they are being armed. So ISIS are now in Europe being armed. They've moved from Idlib to fight in Ukraine. So that's not exactly the working people of Ukraine, is it? Yeah, so as I was saying, let's continue and see what else this Jessica Adams had to say here about Ukraine. So she goes on to talk about I'm not going to really talk about her techniques or anything there. So she talks about Uranus, and she says this is an exact description of what happened next, and it also tells us that the biggest shock is over. So she says whenever we see war, we see Uranus because it describes the shock. Well, in the words of George Galloway, these things don't start when Sky News starts reporting on them and when people start putting up Ukraine flags on their Twitter bios. They start when they start. And this wasn't really a shock because people of us who'd paid attention since 2014 knew that there was a situation incubating there. And, I think loads of people who do follow these things were well aware of a build-up of tensions in the Donbass in that particular area, the shelling of individuals, the desire of those states to break away and form an independent nation aligned with Russia. We knew that this issue of Ukraine joining the EU and NATO was going to come up, so it's really a shock. Anyway, then she says Uranus in Taurus is a revolution in the world economy, and Uranus in Capricorn is a revolution in global status. Yeah, well, I think basically, yes, we do know that during all this, what has Joe Biden done? He signed into law the genesis of a digital currency, of an American digital currency, which of course will be linked to a social credit score. So I mentioned that the first digital currency will come about during March, and we already see that happening, don't we? Okay. Then she says, this is the end of the Russian financial system. Indeed is it, because Russia is simply moving closer to China and their financial system. So it's not the end of it. They are just setting up a system independent of the dollar. I think it's more likely the end of the dollar system, really. Bearing in mind the whole Ponzi system is absolutely at breaking point, and the American economy is going to suffer absolutely wrecking inflation, as is the British economy. These economies are simply not viable. Manufacturing isn't viable without the nickel, vanadium, chrome, platinum, everything that comes from Russia. They are simply a treasure trove of exotic minerals. Between them and South Africa, they're producing most minerals, and South Africa is more likely to edge that side. So certainly this is the end of the financial system as we know it. The currencies will crash and will all be moved on to a digital currency. And do you know that with smart contracts and with blockchain technology, they can program your money, because money is no longer, I don't know if the word is fungible, but like basically if you've got a £10 note, you don't know the history of that £10 note. But with digital currency, they can tell, like with the Bitcoin, they know the history of that Bitcoin or that segment of Bitcoin, because Bitcoins can be broken up. But yes, so digital currency has a history, and you can also use smart contracts to limit what you spend the money on. So it's not like money now, once it's in your account, you can blow it on the races at the horses, you can buy up all the burgers you want, you can smoke, you can drink, you can invest, you can do whatever you want with it. Not so when it's digital currency, because it's programmable. She says it is also the radical rebirth of Ukraine with the European Union, NATO, and the UN. Oh, God. Like we want the EU, NATO, and UN. They are the most corrupt, globalist facilitating bodies. Oh, Ukraine is going to be reborn into this utopia of the EU. No, the EU's finished. It's on its last legs. There's going to be massive interest rate hikes to protect the euro. It's falling apart at the seams, the EU. The sun is rising in the east. This person doesn't have a clue. The UN is defunct and has been for a long time. It's always been a paper tiger. And the NATO has no raison d'etre other than to menace Russia and to cause international conflict. So, no. Why is the biggest shock over? Because Uranus has left 10 Taurus. Yes, but it will be triggering other planets. The world economy is dominated by money laundering, and Putin's attack will bring an end to that by 2026. Oh yes, so Putin and money laundering in Russia is the problem of the whole world. Notice how she totally leaves out the fact that Ukraine is a client state of American corruption, particularly the Democrats, who all have their grubby fingers in there. I'm not saying the Rhino Republicans are any better, but it's particularly the Democrats that are totally enmeshed. Newland, Biden, Obama, all the interests they have with the corruption in the gas industry. But no, it's money laundering, and it's Putin that's the biggest problem. Ah, dear. And once Putin's brought down, it's all going to be glorious, guys. Don't worry about it. We're not going to do anything else about the other corruption and the dreadful governments and the Soros controlling everything in the World Economic Forum. No, let's not worry about that. It's all Putin. She says that it's evident now, as this is published in March 2022, that the Russian money laundromat is blowing up, like there isn't money laundering going on in every country and every facility of the world. The whole art world is a money laundering operation. And come on. She goes on to say here, she says something about Pluto. There's a change in the balance of power in the world order. Well, there I agree. Yes. Okay. And it describes political parties within Ukraine. What political parties? There's only Zelensky's party. He's imprisoned the people from the other political party. So we don't exactly have a democracy there, do we? Interesting. She went on to say something interesting about, she said the very latest point at which I would expect Vladimir Putin to go down or get out of the picture is September 20th, 2023, she says. He is a symbol of Pluto in Capricorn, as is Donald Trump, his American friend, and Trump is over. She says you don't need either man's birth chart to say that. In fact, the data for both charts is dubious. All you need to do is watch Pluto. Yeah, so don't worry about Donald Trump's chart. Don't worry about Putin's chart. They're over because they're represented by Pluto in Capricorn. No, Pluto in Capricorn represents the banking cartels, BlackRock, Vanguard, the financial interests that have led us into all this, the financial interests connected to the Rothschilds and their ilk, which have been behind every war, every conflict, all the strife, and which are totally behind, with the Rockefellers, with others, it's not just them, with the British aristocracy and the Pilgrim Society, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, the CFR, these are the Rand Corporation, all of these Illuminati families, their organizations, the Freemasons, the Jesuits, all working together. That is the problem. No. She says the problem is Trump and Putin. They're the big bad man. I mean, this is such globalist narratives. Like everything's going to be perfect if you get rid of those two. Those are two people who might possibly be pushing back. The big problem is the entire world order that really got going under the British Empire, the British aristocracy, plus other banking interests, which has spread its tentacles, like I say, through the Pilgrim Society, the Chatham House, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, which is Chatham House, then into the CFR, through the State Department, through using CIA, Mossad, MI5, which are all one thing, and which only work together to further the interests of the banking cartels and the elites that have financed every war, blah, blah, blah. So as you can see, I really wasn't buying anything there, and I really just think that was a weak attempt at a chart reading, because it doesn't really say anything. It's just reinforcing globalist narratives and talking about how wonderful everything is. Okay, I've got some more stuff to say on Zelensky. This is my getter. Please follow me, guys. I'm trying to post a lot of quality information every day. There I am, of course. And I don't want to go on all of this, but just to cover some stories. I like this one that says the general public doesn't want wars, only the elites want them. Absolutely, and because they only benefit the elite. Who benefited from the whole health scenario? Jeff Bezos, the very richest people benefited. This whole thing and this war with Russia, because of the coming mass shortages, famine, shutdown of the supply chain, shutdown of shipping, food shortages, it's all going to create feudalism again. It's all going to be a consolidation of power up and the wiping out of the middle class, which is what I went back to saying in my video on why capitalists love communism, which was a long time ago, and I used that expression I called it the Vulcanist agenda, the wiping out of the middle class, so that you have an untouchable elite that will get further and further and further away, more and more power. Maybe they'll make more use of genetic technology to live longer, to become like Greek gods, and you've got this layer on the bottom of people who don't even have a chance at getting up or lifting themselves up, because all revolutions come from the middle class. So they need to get rid of an educated, vibrant, profitable middle class of independent people who run their own business, who know what's getting on. They need to be rid of that, because that's where the threat is. So that's what this is all about. Candace Owen, I just retweeted her. DuckDuckGo, guys, that's going the same way as Google, as reported by David Vance there. So just watch out for your search results on DuckDuckGo. They're doing some censorship. Ireland is operating on their 90-day oil reserves. There may be censorship coming in Ireland. I also quoted Dr. Vernon Coleman there and Mike Eden. That's just some memes for you, something on the... Anyway, we're not talking about that now. Biden, electric car, that nonsense. I don't like this story either. Apparently it's okay now on Twitter or Facebook to call for violence and assassination of Putin. This seems to me now we just branching out into total double standards now. So now, as I say, it's a sinister double standard, because we are saying, okay, in some cases we condone violence. In some cases we condone calling for violence. In what circumstances will they condone calling for violence next? Maybe people are against Putin, but what when they call for violence against your leader that you like, or your leader that you voted for, or your religious leader, or your something? Wait until they call for violence against someone connected to you or you. I think this is a very dangerous path. It's, again, going away from saying some things are absolutely wrong to, okay, murder is always wrong, rape is always wrong, whatever. They now say, oh, well, in some cases it's okay. It's just this whole blurring thing. It all boils down to this leftist stuff of his truth, your truth, my truth. There's no absolute truth. There are no absolutes now. Everything's a grey area. Everything's okay in the right circumstances. And who decides if it's okay? They do. And you see, it gives the controllers of the narrative total control. If you say point blank, it's never okay to call for violence against people, that's clear. But now it's going to be okay depending on whoever's in control of the narrative. Very dangerous. Now, let's get back to Zelensky. I wanted to talk about him. I had this article here. He has a wonderful Italian villa in an elite resort. It's a mansion there. And it says here, President Volodymyr Zelensky is getting rid of real estate not only in Ukraine, he also owns a luxury villa in one of the most expensive resorts in Italy, Forte delle Marmi. I probably said that wrong. And it turns out that he's just put this house up for sale for 4.5 million euros. He's doing really well for a comedian in a small country speaking a language very few people speak, that no one's ever heard of. Are there any comedians in the UK that are doing this well? That they've got a house for 4.5 million in Italy? Wait until you see the rest. There it is. Oh, by the way, this I just tweeted as a list of all the countries that America has invaded and laid waste to and bombed people no one wants to talk about. Yes, the Pandora Papers, very interesting. Ukraine leader seeks to justify his offshore accounts. So files that were obtained by the ICIJ claim Volodymyr Zelensky and his partners established a network of offshore companies in 2012. He created the offshore companies to protect income from then pro-Russian President Viktor Yanukovych, right? So he's got all these offshore goodies. By the way, this is Novak Djokovic being banned from America now. I just have to get back to the stories of Volodymyr. By the way, this was a story that Russell Brand was doing some information. It says here, vital information that the Jacobin piece, which Russell Brand is reading, fails to disclose. Told you guys, I think this man is fake opposition, and this article kind of represents it by saying the Jacobin piece. Jacobins, French Revolution, dodgy banker people. Yeah. Okay, I'll let you look at that yourself and make up your own mind, because it's a bit off track of what I've been talking about. Okay. So here, you know, obviously they want everyone to donate to Ukraine for the humanitarian appeal. Well, what about Zelensky himself donating? He can help ordinary Ukrainians. In fact, he has $1.2 billion at his account at the Costa Rican branch of Dresdner Bank, Latin America. Right? 1.2 billion. I wonder where he accumulated 1.2 billion. They'll say this comedian's doing really well. He must be absolutely hilarious. Apparently he can do more than play a piano with his penis. Okay, this was accumulated through monthly installments that reached the account of the president of Ukraine from 3 philanthropists, Ukrainian oligarchs, Reinat Akhmetov, Viktor Pinchuk from Deutsche Bank, well, not from, he's got Deutsche Bank accounts, and Igor Kolomoisky. And he transferred from the Banque Nationale de Paris in Geneva. So when people are talking about, oh, he's giving an address to Parliament and he's like Churchill, maybe they should look at some of these funders and ask who's really pulling his strings. Another question, where did he get it's actually $35 million for his Florida villa? Interesting. Oh, guys, I don't know if you guys in the UK, the meerkats from comparethemeerkat.com, they've been banned. They're off TV, you know. It's crazy. If you guys are watching in another country, there's this long-running ad. I mean, it's been going literally 17 years, totally ridiculous. It was for a comparison website called Compare the Market. And the advert was a play on words, and they had these 2 Russian meerkats, Sergei and his friend, whatever his name was. And it was Compare the Meerkat. And it was dumb. I mean, I'm sorry, I can't explain this in a way that sounds fairly sensible. It was a dumb advert, but I tell you, these Compare the Meerkats, Sergei and his friend, were on TV, every advert for years, 17 years. You couldn't turn on mainstream media without seeing Sergei and his friend, the Russian meerkats. Banned, you know, obviously key allies of Putin. Yeah. So I don't know if I have anything else there. Yes, here we go. President Zelensky of Ukraine. He is in hot water over a $35 million Florida mansion and unexplained $1.2 billion in cash in an offshore account in Costa Rica. We nearly need to have severe questions about this guy. But don't worry, if you go into Marks and Spencer, which is like a big food shop, also keep closed, but you know, people do buy their groceries there. They'll ask you when you pay if you want to donate £1 to Ukraine. They chug you while you're trying to pay. But don't worry, their leader's got plenty of money. There we go. I'm just going to see if there were any other... That was my video I did the other day. I was just advertising it on Getter. That, guys, we may as well finish on that. That is a picture of his luxurious Italian villa that he's now selling, worth $4.5 million. He has numerous properties in Mayfair in the hottest areas in London as well, I must just tell you. At least 3 properties in the best areas in London, plus this, plus his Florida place. I mean, this guy's doing mighty, mighty, mighty well. There you go. There's more on the Pandora Papers show further offshore assets that Zelensky appears not to have revealed, like a 25% stake in Daviga, a Cyprus holding company. Daviga, in turn, owns Multex Multinap Cork, a previously unknown entity registered in the tax havens, British Virgin Islands, and also there also talks about the Shafir brothers holding in this as well, and you can go on to read there. So, when Jessica Adams is talking about Trump and Putin and the money laundering and Putin and Russia, maybe she should think about Zelensky and all those tax havens, because I think the biggest threat is not money laundering in Russia. It's the tax havens in Guernsey, Jersey, the Channel Islands, of course, Isle of Man, the Caribbean, the Cayman Islands. That's where I want to be looking, and I want to be looking and tearing the veil asunder from Vanguard to find where the real power is. Never mind pitiful money laundering in Russia that's going on pretty much everywhere. So there you go, guys. I hope you enjoy that. I enjoy doing plenty of grist for the mill there, isn't it?